Ash got up early in the morning before Pikachu had risen and then stretched and did a few exercises while he watched the sun rise. He was right when he told himself that sunrises on the road would be different than they were all the years he had watched them from the roof of his house. Even though he wasn't that far away from Pallet Town, it was still at an angle that he had never seen the sun rise at before, and he wanted to soak up every moment. After the sun came up and he finished his exercises, the boy sat down by the fire pit and, after lighting a fire, began cooking for himself and his Pokémon. Though they ate Pokémon food, he still liked making new batches daily over the fire so all the flavor could bake into the pellets just right. They loved it, and since he made their food fresh, daily, instead of carrying around days-old helpings, which could easily get stale, it was healthier too. No sooner had the food started cooking and Pikachu come out of the tent, looking hungry and sniffing the air as he ran up to Ash's side. "Hungry, buddy?" he asked his first Pokémon in amusement. The yellow rodent nodded his head furiously in affirmation while holding his arms out. "Pika Pikachu." Ash chuckled upon hearing that and then released his other two Pokémon, Badoo and Spearow, so they could eat as well. After he finished making breakfast, the black-haired boy and his three companions settled down for a nice and relaxing early morning meal. At least, they would have if Ash hadn't heard something riffling through his backpack, which was sitting near the tent. He quickly turned around to see what was going on and spotted a Pokémon he recognized all too well. It was a Rattata, and it was currently picking through his backpack in a search for food. Ash simply guessed that the smell of the cooking had lured it in, and now it was trying to find the source of the delicious odor. The amber-eyed trainer quickly grabbed some of the leftover food that he had on his small travel plate and slowly walked over to the foraging Pokémon. When Rattata noticed him, it went to take off until the boy suddenly put the food out in front of it. Seeing this, the purple-furred rat cautiously sniffed at it for just the briefest of moments before, with a final glance at Ash, Rattata promptly devoured the scraps. While the wild Pokémon munched away at the morsels of food, Ash withdrew his Pokédex and scanned the diminutive little thief. Pokédex entry number 019. Rattata, the mouse Pokémon. Its incisors grow continuously throughout its life. If its incisors get too long, this Pokémon becomes unable to eat, and it starves to death. This Pokémon is common but hazardous. Its sharp incisors can easily cut right through hard wood. This Rattata is male and has the abilities Run Away, Guts and Hustle. This Pokémon knows the moves Tackle, Tail Whip, Quick Attack, Focus Energy and Bite. The black-haired boy looked back at the wild Pokémon after hearing all of that and thought to himself, "This Rattata actually seems pretty special. To know all of those moves already and to possess all three abilities that a member of its species can have. Pretty impressive indeed." He was quickly brought out of his thoughts though by Pikachu, whom was bounding over from his place near the fire to Rattata. There, he sat down and began talking animatedly to his rodent kin about whatever it was they fancied discussing in Pokémon speech. While they did that, Ash returned Spearow and Badoo, who had just finished eating, and then began tearing the campsite down and packing everything up. Once he was done, he went to get Pikachu but found him standing there behind him with Rattata by his side. The messy-haired trainer was confused at first, at least until his first Pokémon began explaining everything to him that he and Rattata had been discussing. Apparently, according to Pikachu, Rattata had dreams of becoming strong and standing out amongst the many thousands of brethren he had in just the Kanto region alone. And so, he went everywhere he could, challenging strong wild Pokémon to battle any chance that presented itself. He had received plenty of experience and learned the moves he now knew by battling on a regular basis, but he wanted to become more powerful. The only problem was, he didn't know how to achieve it. Fortunately, Pikachu had told Rattata all about Ash and what he was like as a trainer. He also spoke about how hard that he himself, Badoo and Spearow trained on a regular basis and about how much stronger they had all become in just a short time of being under the young man's tutelage. Gaining strength and power had apparently been a big point Pikachu had driven home. Rattata came up to Ash soon after Pikachu finished his explanation and then just sat and looked up at the young trainer. The boy bent down and addressed the normal type curiously. Is it true, Rattata? Do you want to become strong? The purple rat nodded vigorously. Rat-ta Rattata. Ash smiled at hearing that and then asked, do you want to come with me and be my Pokémon? I'll help make you strong if you do, and that's a promise. Rattata nodded again in confirmation. Rattata. Rat. Rattata. Seeing the choice had been made, Ash pulled an empty Pokeball from his belt and lightly touched Rattata on the head with it. The large fanged rodent was quickly sucked inside of the ball in a beam of red energy, and it didn't even wobble once before dinging to signify a complete capture. As it did, stars burst forth from the red and white ball. After capturing his third wild Pokémon, Ash stood up and smiled joyfully before attaching the Pokeball to his belt. He then looked down at Pikachu and nodded, thanking him for his help in capturing Rattata before announcing that it was time to set out on the open road. Agreeing with an enthusiastic chirp, Pikachu hopped up onto his shoulder and then, together, they set off for the main road and left the field behind that they had called home for 2 long weeks. Some time after finally starting out on his journey proper, Ash Ketchum could be seen walking along the road to Viridian City. He was coming closer to the part of Route 1 that cut through a small stretch woods, but just as he and Pikachu were about to enter the forest thicket, he heard what sounded like a battle being waged off to the right-hand side of the road. He and Pikachu looked at one another and nodded before the boy took off and followed the sound of the brawling. Eventually, he came upon the scene of 2 Pokémon, a Nidoran male and female, fighting viciously in a stretch of open field. Almost immediately, Ash pulled out his Pokédex and scanned the 2 fighting Pokémon. Pokédex entry number 029. Nidoran, the poison pin Pokémon. Nidoran has barbs that secrete a powerful poison. They are thought to have developed as protection for this small-bodied Pokémon. When enraged, it releases a horrible toxin from its horn. This Nidoran is female and has the abilities Poison Point, Rivalry and Hustle. This Pokémon knows the moves Scratch, Poison Sting, Double Kick and Bite. Pokédex entry number 032. Nidoran, the poison pin Pokémon. Nidoran has developed muscles for moving its ears. Thanks to them, the ears can be freely moved in any direction. Even the slightest sound does not escape this Pokémon's notice. Its large ears are always kept upright. If it senses danger, it will attack with a poisonous sting. This Nidoran is male and has the abilities Poison Point, Rivalry and Hustle. This Pokémon knows the moves Peck, Focus Energy, Double Kick and Poison Sting. The boy put his Pokédex away after listening to the scan and then watched, with enraptured attention, as the 2 small Pokémon battled it out with one another. Each one was fighting with higher than normal levels of skill than a wild Pokémon should have, which led Ash to his next decision. He then walked out into the clearing and addressed the 2 Pokémon who, by that point, saw him and stopped fighting. Hey you 2, I see you like battling. I have an offer for you. Grinning, he pointed with one finger. I challenge you both to a 2-on-2 battle. You 2 against my Pokémon. If you win, then I'll give you each a week's supply of Pokémon food. If you lose, you'll let me catch you and then I'll train you both up and show you what true strength is. What do you say? Both Nidoran thought about his offer for a moment or two, looking at each other, and then finally nodded to him in agreement. Ash smiled when he saw that and pulled 2 Pokeballs from his belt. Alright, let's get started. Spearow, Badoo, show your power. After enlarging and tossing both balls into the air, they snapped open and released Ash's first 2 captured Pokémon. In flashes of light they soon appeared with cries of their names and then settled on the field, ready for battle. Are you 2 ready? This is your first battle after all the training you've been doing. You ready to show what you're made of? Ash held his fist up and looked between the 2 of them as he said those words. Badoo and Spearow looked back at him and nodded before facing forward and giving twin battle cries. Row. Bud. Ash rooted himself in place and prepared for battle while Pikachu jumped down beside of him. Alright, let's go. At that moment, both Nidorans started to charge and the boy moved swiftly. Dodge those incoming charges. Spearow, use Aerial Ace on the female Nidoran. Badoo, jump out of the way and then hit the male with Absorb. Spearow flew out of the way of the incoming blue-skinned Pokémon that was about to use Scratch on him and then followed up with an aerial ace that hit Nidoran and sent her skidding through the dirt. Badoo jumped to the side of the male Nidoran, just barely avoiding a peck attack, and then hit the poison pin Pokémon with the tendrils of energy-sucking absorb. Nidoran quickly grew weak as his energy was stolen and started to fall to the side just before the other Nidoran came in suddenly and hit Badoo. The surprise hit sent her flying away from her target and thereby also cancelling absorb. Badoo landed near Spearow with a cry of pain and that immediately garnered Ash's attention. "You alright, Badoo?" Badoo slowly nodded and stood back up, but both Nidorans were ready to go again and they were already preparing their next attacks. The male Nidoran began using focus energy while the other one launched a poison sting at Badoo. Not about to be left flat-footed, the prepared young man called out. Badoo, jump to the side to avoid that poison sting and then follow it up with Stun Spore. She did just that and dodged the attack before releasing a cloud of small, yellow paralyzing spores that quickly floated towards the female Nidoran. At the same time, the male of the pair took off at Spearow, fully energized from the use of focus energy. As soon as he reached the hovering flying type, Nidoran began using Peck repeatedly, trying fiercely to hit the tiny bird Pokémon. Ash was faster though and commanded Spearow use agility to dodge. Before his feathery little fighter could execute the move and dodge though, Nidoran suddenly transitioned into a double kick and managed to hit Spearow, which sent him falling towards the ground and landing with a grunt of pain. On the flip side of the battle, the female Nidoran was about to get overwhelmed by Stun Spore. However, just before that could happen, her male counterpart appeared and used double kick in order to kick up a bunch of dirt into the air. This clever tactic caused the dirt itself to collide with Stun Spore and cancel out the attack. Ash remained calm and looked at Badoo and Spearow, who had just gotten back to his feet. "Are you two okay to keep going?" Bud, Badoo. The small grass type replied readily. "Row, Spearow." Spearow echoed with a determined squawk. "All right then you two, let's end this," their trainer announced while raising his fist again. "Spearow, pick Badoo up. Then use agility and fly toward the Nidorans." Spearow did just that and soon, he was flying at high speeds toward the poison pin pair of Pokémon with Badoo grasped securely in his clawed feet. Smirking, Ash yelled, "Now Spearow, let Badoo go and use that momentum to hit the male Nidoran with an aerial ace. Badoo, use the speed of Spearow letting you go to smash all of your body weight into the female." Spearow and Badoo obeyed perfectly and performed their commanded attacks. The Nidoran pair wasn't prepared for the smooth and swiftly executed teamwork strategy and thus, they took the full brunt of the attacks. Spearow let Badoo go and the small grass type smashed into the female Nidoran at full speed, like a small torpedo, which sent her sailing through the air. Spearow likewise utilized the momentum of agility and turned in mid-flight toward the male Nidoran, rocketing at the unprepared poison type with a high-speed aerial ace. Within seconds, the small but fierce bird hit his mark and sent Nidoran careening back towards its partner. Ash, however, didn't let up. "Now Badoo, use Leech Seed on the female Nidoran while she's down. Spearow, I want you to get in close to the male and use a rapid fury attack." Immediately after giving those orders, his Pokémon attacked their opponents again, viciously. Badoo launched a small pod of Leech Seed from the bud atop her head, which implanted itself onto the female Nidoran and wrapped her up in energy-stealing vines. As she cried out in pain, the male tried to get up and assist his downed comrade, only for Spearow to appear in front of him and start using Fury Attack viciously. After the small flying type had finished his attack, he made use of one more smack of his wing and sent Nidoran flying into his partner, whom was still struggling inside of the health-sapping vines of Leech Seed. Due to this, the pink-skinned male slammed into the blue-skinned female and they both fell completely to the ground. Ash was just about to call out the final attacks until, suddenly, Badoo began glowing green. A second later, she caused small roots to appear out of the ground that went creeping rapidly towards the downed and intertwined Nidoran pair. The roots themselves soon encircled the poison pin Pokémon duo and aggressively started sapping precious energy from the pair. The stolen energy then began tracing back along the routes, just the way they had come, and found Badoo. The health that had been stolen from the Nidoran pair was then used to nourish her back to full vitality in what seemed to be only the blink of an eye. Ash knew, as soon as he saw what had happened, that Badoo had just learned and used Ingrain and was about to comment on it until something else happened. Long, dark green tendrils of energy, much larger than those of Absorb, began flowing from Badoo like a host of ethereal tentacles. The surprising and completely unexpected second new move struck the downed pair of Nidoran and started draining large amounts of energy from them. The recovered energy then began speeding back towards Badoo, who redirected the flow towards Spearow and started restoring her partner's own health back to normal. Ash himself was stunned. Badoo had just learned Ingrain and what he knew had to be Mega Drain, both at the same time. Allowing his mind to process what had just happened, he simply could not believe how fast Badoo was growing. Even for a grass type. After Spearow had regained his health, he chirped a quick word of gratitude to Badoo, whom smiled in response, effectively showing that any lingering hard feelings she held against her small, feathered partner had truly been forgiven and forgotten. As for Ash himself, now that he saw both of his Pokémon fully recovered, it enabled him to call out what he hoped would be the final attack of the battle. "Alright you two, let's end this. Spearow, pick Badoo up again and then speed toward both Nidorans as fast as you can. Once you get right on top of them, stay together and then start spinning to gain more speed. After that, hit them with all your combined force." His Pokémon did as he commanded and began their combination attack. Spearow picked Badoo up again and took off with a screech, and within seconds, they were right on top of the Nidoran pair. Unfortunately for the two wild Pokémon, all they could do was brace for impact with wide eyes, their bodies too exhausted to move. Soon, Spearow and Badoo smashed themselves into their poison-type opponents like a twin body slam, causing a big dust cloud to kick up from the sheer force of the combined impact alone. Out of the cloud of dust soon emerged Spearow, once more carrying Badoo, and both of them quickly returned to Ash's side. Together, they and their trainer, as well as Pikachu, waited for the smoke cloud to settle. After it did, the anxious boy in question saw both Nidoran laying sprawled out on the ground with swirls of unconsciousness in their eyes. Knowing they had won, the victorious young rookie smiled and then pulled two empty Pokeballs from his belt. After enlarging them, he tossed both balls at the two unconscious Pokémon, and immediately upon making contact, they were sucked inside. The following few moments were somewhat tense as Ash watched the two Pokeballs roll and shake on the ground before finally going still and erupting with stars, the sign of a pair of successful captures. Satisfied with the results, he walked over and picked up both Pokeballs before turning to Spearow and Badoo and congratulating them. "That was an awesome battle, guys. I'm so proud of you. Your training is really paying off and I'm super happy with how far you've both come in only a week." At his words of praise, Spearow and Badoo vocalized their joy and embraced their trainer in the best way they could. After returning the hug, he congratulated them again before returning the conquering duo back to their Pokeballs. Finally, Ash turned to look down at Pikachu and smiled. "Well buddy, you wanna meet the two new additions to our team?" The spunky little electric type nodded excitedly. "Pika." With that, Ash pulled out and enlarged the two Pokeballs he had just filled with new friends and released both Nidorans, whom appeared and looked to be quite battered. Seeing this, the boy knelt down and took off his pack before fishing through it to find his medical supply case, which was chock full of all kinds of medicines, potions and recovery items. He quickly selected a hyper potion and two Oron berries and then went to work on healing his two newest Pokémon. Once he was done a few minutes later, both Nidorans appeared good as new and were now sitting down comfortably while staring up at Ash. He looked at them both in return and then spoke kindly. "Look, I just want you two to know how impressed I was with you in that battle. For wild Pokémon, you were really good. I can train the both of you to be just as strong as my other Pokémon if you want to." He then smiled and clenched his fist. "We all work hard to reach the top on this team because we want to be the best we can possibly be. But for that to happen, in order for us to achieve our goals, we train hard, very hard. Are you too interested in being part of that? Do you wanna be the best? Both of the poison-type companions looked at each other for a few seconds, unable to deny their desire to become stronger, and then turned back to Ash before excitedly nodded and calling out at the same time. Nidoran. The black-haired young trainer beamed brightly at their reply and then reached out and started gently rubbing both of his new Pokémon on the sides of their cheeks. Okay then, you've got yourself a deal. We're a team now. Pikachu Pie. Pikachu chirped in greeting as he bounded up as well and started to become acquainted with his two newest teammates. After a few minutes of bonding with his newest Poké partners, Ash returned them both and then looked at Pikachu. Come on buddy, let's get going. It looks like a storm might be coming and I wanna get under the shelter of some trees when it starts to rain. I think the remainder of the way between here and Viridian City is lined with nearby forests though, so we should be good. The electric mouse jumped up onto his trainer's shoulder and nodded in agreement. Pika Pie, Pie Pikachu. With their little side adventure finally ended, they set out on their way, locating the road again rather quickly and once more setting course for Viridian City. With storm clouds gathering above, however, both of them were secretly hoping that they would make it to the city without any further detours. Ash had indeed been right about the possibility of running into rain. They had been on the road no longer than 10 minutes when it started pouring rain. He and Pikachu had to take shelter in the hollow of a nearby tree while they waited for the storm to subside. Once it did, the traveling duo emerged from the tree and looked around at the soaked terrain. Ash eventually made his way back onto the main road, and just before he started out, Pikachu suddenly poked him on the side of the head. The boy turned around to see what his Pokémon wanted and saw the electric mouse pointing up toward the sky. When he looked up, his jaw almost dropped. There, high in the sky, was a gloriously full rainbow stretching across the sky. What caught their attention even more so, however, wasn't the rainbow itself but the strange creature who seemed to be making said rainbow as it flew out in front of the arching bow of multiple colors. Ash knew that the creature in question was a Pokémon as soon as he saw it, and he immediately, with great shock, was able to discern its identity. He recognized it from all the books he had read and from the many lectures Professor Oak had given him over the years. The Pokémon he knew he was now seeing, unless his eyes were fooled, had not been seen by human eyes in hundreds of years, until now at least. The creature flying high and loftily above the rain-soaked earth was none other than the fabled and legendary rainbow Pokémon Ho-Oh. Ash and Pikachu could only stare in stupefied awe of the magnificent and majestic Pokémon whom was flying overhead. As its large, rainbow-colored wings carried it across the cumulus heavens, they heard a loud, high-pitched and powerful screech emit from the fabled bird, as if to cement what they were seeing. Who? The young trainer and Pokémon alike watched with wide eyes as the legendary flying type flew on until it began to disappear out of sight into the clouds. Only when it had vanished did they finally look at one another. Wow Pikachu, that was just amazing. I can't believe we actually just saw the legendary Pokémon Ho-Oh itself. Did that really just happen? The black-haired boy looked up at his small starter, as if hoping for confirmation that he hadn't just been seeing things. Pikachu, whom was still staring skyward with sharp dark eyes that revealed the inner wonder he too felt, nodded slowly. Pika Pie. Do you realize? His trainer had to swallow in order to get his words out, eyes glued back to the sky again. How many people go their whole life hoping to see what we just saw, and we're not even that far from my own hometown yet. Once more, Pikachu nodded, still in a state of disbelief himself. Pikachu Pie. After a time, the two of them finally recovered from the shock of what they had seen, but, just when Ash was about to start walking again, he felt something very light fall down and rest upon his head. Reaching up, he grasped the strange object and then brought it down to eye level. What he saw shocked him all over again. There, held between his thumb and forefinger, was a rainbow wing. A feather from the legendary Ho-Oh itself. Ash stared at it with wide and wavering eyes for a long while, his attention utterly captivated by the sparkling beauty of the multicolored feather. Pikachu, do you know what this is? He spoke with a tremor in his tone. This is a rainbow wing. This actually came from Ho-Oh itself. The small electric type on his shoulder also stared transfixed at the feather his trainer held, eyes entranced by the soft, luminous and sparkling glow of the incomprehensibly valuable item that Ash now grasped firmly. Pikachu Pie. Pika Pie Pikachu. The fascinated young man stared at the feather for a time and admired its multicolored beauty before, finally, he knelt down, removed his pack, took out a strip of blue cloth from one of the pockets and wrapped up the precious item. He then stuck it into his pack for safekeeping and looked up at his partner, smiling. You know what, buddy? I'll take this as a good omen for our journey. Pikachu smiled down at him and nodded in agreement. Pikachu Pie. With a fresh spring in their step and a heart lightened by newfound hope, the two closely bonded partners set off again, their spirits uplifted and both of them possessing a positive outlook for the future as they made for Viridian City. Neither of them knew, however, that, high up in the sky and some ways away, Ho-Oh was thinking to herself at that very same moment. Take my wing as a gift, dear chosen one, and let it bring you good fortune for the ventures that lie ahead. We shall meet again, once you are ready for the trial that wing shall bring. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX fast, coming close to the end of the forest. Just as they were about to make their way through the last small stretch of woods, however, a loud scream echoed up to them from down the hill they were standing atop, the sound emanating from somewhere close to the nearby river. Ash turned to the sound while Pikachu's ears perked up and, without needing to discuss the matter, they both came to the conclusion that someone must have been in trouble. Brow furrowing as he went on high alert, Ash prepared himself for action and then started running down the hill as fast as he could. When he finally made it to the source of the distressed call, which was indeed right next to a wide and fast-moving river near a powerful waterfall, Ash saw that a young girl was the one who had given off the perilous cry. The girl in question looked to be a little older than himself and had bright orange hair, which was tied back to the right side of her head in a short ponytail. She was wearing a yellow shirt that was cut low around the stomach, jean shorts that had two red suspenders coming up and attaching over her shoulders, and white shoes with red and yellow designs on either side of both. She was also carrying a large red bag on her back, which was slung across her right shoulder by a similarly colored strap. The young girl was crouching down by the edge of the river with her hands over her head and, towering over her, was a huge and ferocious-looking Gyarados. The infamously foul-tempered water-type serpent was glaring down at her, enraged and ready to attack at any second. Not wasting a second, Ash sprang into action. Pikachu, use Thunderbolt on Gyarados and get it away from her. Smirking, Pikachu jumped off of his trainer's shoulder and high into the air. Pika-Chu! The powerful bolt of electrical energy sped through the air and hit Gyarados head-on, causing it to bellow in rage and pain as it was lit up like a burning Christmas tree. Pikachu, for his part, landed in a battle stance on the rocky riverbank, his cheeks sparking as he prepared to launch himself into combat again. The furiously riled up atrocious Pokémon looked around for the source of the bolt of lightning that had struck it and, upon laying its eyes on Pikachu, Gyarados became even more incensed and roared. "Yeah! Pikachu, get ready!" Ash called out as he anticipated the aquatic Leviathan's next move. "Pika," he replied while crouching low in preparation for the next move. The surly and cross dual-type Pokémon soon opened its mouth and then fired a large torrent of water from its mouth straight at the small mouse. Luckily, Ash was ready. Pikachu, dodge using agility and then start running at Gyarados. The fast and agile electric type swiftly dodged the powerful hydro pump that came exploding from Gyarados' mouth and then started running at it using the speed and evasiveness increasing move his trainer had commanded. Snarling as Pikachu deftly feinted to the side in order to avoid the powerful blast of water, Gyarados opened its wide mouth yet again and charged up a swirling white-blue sphere of energy. In mere seconds, it fired a huge beam of raw draconian energy at Pikachu with all the rage it could muster. Pikachu, use Thunderbolt on the ground and combine it with focused lightning. Aim it at the ground and the force will send you into the air. Ash swiftly ordered his counter-strategy just as Gyarados unleashed its attack. Pikachu did as he was commanded without flaw, charging up and releasing a bolt of electricity at the ground, while running, which sent him flying skyward. Fortunately, the last-minute maneuver allowed him to avoid the incoming Dragon Rage attack just as it hit the spot he had been occupying mere seconds before. Gyarados didn't stop there though, because as soon as the beam of energy struck the ground, the wrathful water serpent brought its tail out of the water and swung it around to hit Pikachu. Ash, for his part, thought fast. Pikachu, hit the ground. Quick. The fast little mouse quickly dropped to the river rocks below his belly just as the thick, meaty tail swipe from Gyarados passed over his head. At that, his trainer spoke hurriedly again. Now, get up and use double team to throw Gyarados off. Then start forming a thunder wave cage around it with your clones while it's readying its next attack. Pikachu concentrated and then formed 4 duplicates of himself around Gyarados on the river bank. Immediately after forming, they all began discharging a widely arcing thunder wave attack that started to take shape as an electric cage around their target. Gyarados itself was at first confused and tried to escape the electric prison. However, every time it touched the electric bars, it would get shocked and recoil back. The enraged Pokémon became even angrier at this and then opened its mouth, forming an orange ball of energy from within that spelled trouble. Ash knew what was coming as soon as he saw it and urgently commanded his first Pokémon, Pikachu, don't let it use Hyper Beam. Use a max power Thunderbolt on Gyarados and finish it off. All of you. The powerful and power-packed electric type nodded and then hurried to stand at the head of his clones, his much smaller body only a few feet away from Gyarados' far larger one. Then, with a few seconds of crackling from his now sparking cheeks, along with his doubles, he cried out loudly. Pikachu. The group of Pikachu let loose 5 powerful bolts of electricity that replaced the electric cage and instead struck Gyarados with all possible high-voltage fury. The blue-scaled water Pokémon bellowed aloud in great pain, the water of the river conducting and worsening the shock, but kept charging Hyper Beam regardless. Ash knew that Gyarados couldn't be allowed to use such a powerful attack, but luckily, an idea struck. Pikachu, he called out quickly. Aim your own Thunderbolt right at its mouth where Hyper Beam is charging. Gritting his teeth, Pikachu struggled as he started to redirect his current of electricity toward Gyarados' open mouth instead. Then, just before the resilient and stubbornly hardy Pokémon could release its most powerful attack, Pikachu finally hit the mark dead on and started to electrocute the inside of Gyarados' mouth. This caused the monstrous evolved form of Magikarp to roar again in terrible pain and Hyper Beam to also fully dissipate. Once the brutal and overwhelming electric torture was finally over, Gyarados slumped heavily down into the water, covered in singe marks and burns. Then, with a final glare at Ash and Pikachu, the defeated Titan accepted its loss and slowly started diving back down beneath the surface of the river. Before long, it had utterly vanished. Pikachu, even though victory was clearly theirs and his clones were no more, stood his ground, panting and smirking all the while. Ash himself pumped his fist into the air, cheered and then ran over to his Pokémon. Sliding next to Pikachu, he picked him up and hugged him tightly while congratulating the evolved form of Pichu on his victory. All right buddy, you did it. Ash laughed happily. You totally showed Gyarados who was boss. Great job Pi. Pikachu smiled and held up his little fist in victory. Pikachu Pi. After enjoying the moment, Ash finally put Pikachu down and then stood up and made his way over to the orange-haired girl. Even as he approached, he could see that she was now staring at himself and Pikachu in a way that did little to hide her shock at what she had just witnessed. Are you okay? The black-haired boy asked with a smile. The girl looked at Ash. How did you do that? The tracksuit-wearing trainer seemed confused. What? The Gyarados thing you mean? The girl stood up and put her hands on her hips. Of course the Gyarados thing. How did your little Pikachu beat that huge thing? He merely scratched his Pokémon behind the ears, causing him to make a cute cooing sound of happiness. My buddy is strong, that's how. He's been training really hard and that battle we just had proved it. Ash looked back at the girl and held his hand out. I'm Ash by the way. Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town. And you know my partner now, Pikachu. The spirited electric type gave a peace sign at the girl and smiled. Pikachu pie. The girl eventually overcame her perplexity at the sudden turn of events and was polite enough to stretch out her own hand, shaking Ash's. Nice to meet you both, my name's Misty. She then had the decency to give a small smile and add. Thank you by the way, for saving me. The younger trainer shook her hand firmly but gently. Nice to meet you Misty and no problem. If you don't me asking though, why did Gyarados attack you? Misty seemed to flinch at the mere mention of her attacker but managed to compose herself well as she formed an ashamed look on her face. I was actually fishing for water-type Pokémon and I ended up drawing the attention of Gyarados. They're really territorial and it must have not wanted me here. It attacked me and my own Pokémon were no match for it. Ash placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and shrugged. It wasn't your fault Misty. Gyarados are very difficult Pokémon to handle and anyone could have made the same mistake. Don't be too hard on yourself. The orange-haired girl returned the smile that the boy was giving her. Thanks Ash, I appreciate that. So, what? Are you in your Pikachu Pro level or something to be able to handle that Gyarados? I mean no offense but you look a little young to be a seasoned trainer. He scratched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. Actually, I just started out on my Pokémon journey 2 weeks ago and Pikachu here was my first one. Anyway, we stopped and did some training for a while after I first left home and now we're heading to Viridian City. It'll be Pewter City afterwards, we're gonna enter the Indigo League circuit and I know they have a Pokémon gym there. The thin and athletic female was completely silent. This young rookie trainer before her and his Pikachu, whom he had only been training for 2 weeks, had just stomped a high-level Gyarados. A ferocious and powerful opponent which she, someone that had been training Pokémon far longer, couldn't even scratch. How such a thing could even be possible was far beyond her. The strange young man did say that he and his Pikachu had been training hard and indeed, they must have. They would have needed to train exceedingly hard in order to get to the level they were now at. And in only 2 weeks' time as well. Misty was suddenly brought from her thoughts by Ash looking at something which was laying broken and mangled on the ground near the river. She followed his gaze and upon laying eyes on it, she gasped. My bike. Her distressed voice came out in a wail as she ran over to and then crouched down beside of her destroyed bike. Ash himself stepped back and he and Pikachu remained silent. I don't believe it. That Gyarados must have smashed my bike when it was trying to attack me. What am I gonna do now? It'll take forever to get anywhere on foot. The boy behind her took that opportunity to speak up. I'm really sorry about your bike Misty. If you'd like, you can come with me and Pikachu to Viridian City. I'll carry your bike there on my shoulders and then we can see if someone'll fix it in the city. What do you think? She looked up at him in awe because of his offer and saw him smiling at her. A faint blush adorned her cheeks. Would you really do that Ash? The gentlemanly young man nodded readily. Well of course. It wouldn't be honorable or right to my mom's teachings if I didn't help out a lady when she needed it. I'd be glad to help. Misty smiled again, gratefully this time, and stood back up. Thank you so much Ash, I really appreciate this. He just waved it off and then hoisted the broken bike over his strong shoulders. Together, he and Pikachu, plus Misty, set off for Viridian City. Pikachu rode on top of the bike's wrecked handlebars and the newest female addition to their company stayed right in line with her impromptu savior the whole way. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX set and with it, the sky could be seen turning a deep purplish orange as night slowly fell. The whole way to the city, Ash and Misty had talked about all kinds of topics, namely their dreams and respective goals. Ash had obviously spoken of his desire to become a Pokémon master, and Misty told him that she dreamed of becoming the world's best water-type Pokémon trainer. One who was even better than her idols. The first was Prima, whom was part of the Kanto and Johto Elite Four and a literal expert in the field of water and ice types. The second one was a man named Wallace, the reigning Hoenn region champion and Pokémon coordinator genius. He was not only a regional champion and water-type Pokémon master, but he also had his own Pokémon contest tournament named after him, the Wallace Cup. Just as both the black-haired boy and his orange-headed companion entered the outer suburbs of the city, Ash still carrying Misty's bike with Pikachu sitting atop it, they saw a small police station ahead on the left-hand side of the road. As they walked past it, Misty suddenly stopped and looked at a poster that was hanging on a pole near the station. Getting a closer look, she examined the object in question for a time before gesturing to Ash, whom had stopped and was now curiously looking to see what she was doing. "Ash, come and look at this. It might be a good idea to see what it's about." He did as she requested and stepped up onto the curb beside of her, looking at the poster itself closely. When he got a good look at what it was, he soon found that it was actually a wanted poster and had the image of a man and woman on the front. Their faces were shaded around the eyes so as to not give the full identity, however they looked distinct enough to pick out of a crowd even without a clear face to go by. They were both wearing a white uniform with a large red R printed on the chest and what appeared to be black gloves on their hands that went up to the elbows on the woman and just to the forearms on the man. From what was visible of his one arm at least. The man's white shirt apparently had long sleeves and a slight V-cut at the sternum that showed a black undershirt beneath. He had blue hair that hung down to around neck level, and in his left hand was a red rose, which he was smelling while looking away from the picture. The woman looked to have magenta crimson hair that seemed like it was long and styled into a very unusual fashion, though all of it could not be seen. She was wearing green, bauble-shaped earrings, red lipstick in her own white uniform and black undershirt, which were identical to the man's, only they were cut off at the middle to show her smooth and slim belly. The female in question was holding her left hand out in the picture, as if trying to stop it from being taken. Though, by the smirks on both of their faces, it seemed they didn't overly care who saw them or not. As Ash examined the pictures, Misty held her finger near the writing at the bottom of the poster and read aloud. "Wanted. Known thieves and Pokémon kidnappers. Crimes are listed as but not limited to larceny, destruction of private and public property, breaking and entering, disturbing the peace, evasion of police, unlawful operation of hot air balloon in private air spaces and kidnapping of Pokémon." Ash's right eyebrow raised, with Pikachu also looking at the poster now, while Misty's eyes squinted as she moved to the next paragraph below the first. Suspects are male and female, ages unknown, and identities are likewise unknown. Appears to work in only a team of 2 but could be involved with others. Uses Pokémon in their crimes, Ekans and a coughing. Potential danger of suspects is unknown but if seen do not approach, rumored to be affiliated with mysterious criminal organization Team Rocket. She finished with her finger tracing the last line at the bottom of the poster. If spotted, please notify nearest police station or call emergency hotline to file a report with proper authorities. Once she was done, Ash frowned. Team Rocket, huh? That's really bad. Those guys aren't good news. Misty looked at him. What do you mean? You know about them? He shook his head. Not these 2 specifically, no. But Professor Oak has told me about a shadow organization of criminals based here in Kanto that commits a lot of really bad crimes under the radar. Stealing and trafficking Pokémon are supposedly their biggest operation, but because they're so secretive and well organized, not a lot is known about them. She nodded and then looked back at the poster. Yeah, I think I've heard a rumor or 2 about them before as well. We'll just have to be careful, especially with our Pokémon. Ash put her bike down on the sidewalk for a moment and then went up to the glass double doors of the police station. I'm gonna find out more about these 2 criminals, he informed just before knocking upon the cool surface. Misty walked up to join him just as he knocked, and a short time later, the glass door opened and a blue-haired woman could be seen standing in the entryway. The woman in question had slightly curly, teal-blue hair that was tied into a bushy ponytail in the back with a few strands of hair hanging down around her face. She had a very attractive, pale-skinned complexion and wore red gloss upon her lips. Her eyes were similar to Ash's own in color, which was a light amber. The young woman wore a dark blue police shirt with 2 pockets that had gold buttons over the breasts. The center of the uniform tapered into a lighter blue V shape and both the collar, as well as arm cuffs of the short-sleeved shirt, were colored red. On her lower body was a very short skirt of the same color as the shirt, and it rose high enough on her thighs that the entirety of her long, shapely legs were left exposed. Around her waist was a black belt with a gold buckle, cinched down tightly, and across her right shoulder was a black strap that held up the black bag holding all of her police gear. To complete her ensemble, the pretty young woman was wearing black, low-heeled shoes, white gloves and a blue police cap with a dark brim, red trim around the top and a golden star in the center. When the woman stepped out of the station and saw the two young trainers standing outside the door, she looked at them and then blinked. "Yes. May I help you?" Ash smiled politely at her and asked. "Yeah, I was wondering if you could please tell us more about the criminals that are wanted in that poster, please. Me and my friend just came into town and we saw the wanted sign. Since we both have Pokémon, it made us a little concerned to hear that there are people running around the city trying to steal them." The female officer looked at him and then at Misty before glancing over at the wanted sign. "Oh, you mean those two?" She looked back at Ash again and then stepped fully out onto the sidewalk. "They're Pokémon robbers and are also wanted for a host of other crimes, as you probably read." She held a hand up. "Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about them or who they are. Those photos were taken by a security camera when they tried to break into a Pokémon Center at Vermilion City. They haven't actually been spotted here in Viridian, but we've been keeping our eyes out just in case." She then looked over the two young trainers before asking, "May I ask who you are?" Ash nodded and gestured at himself. "I'm Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town and this is my buddy Pikachu." He gestured at the small electric type on his shoulder and then pulled his Pokédex off of its clip on his side, sliding it open in the process. "I received my first Pokémon in this Pokédex from Professor Oak." He then held the small device up as Dexter started to speak in his robotic voice. "My name is Dexter, I am registered to Pokémon trainer Ash Ketchum and was programmed and given by Professor Samuel Oak." Misty went next and smiled at the woman, holding out a small white card that she had taken out of her red bag. "My name is Misty and this is my official trainer ID." The blue-haired policewoman looked closer at the card and saw that it had a picture of Misty's face on it, as well as her personal information and a licensed league seal at the bottom indicating her official status as a Pokémon trainer. She also saw something else that caused her to blink in surprise before looking at the orange head and smiling. "Well, that's definitely enough for me." She then looked at Ash. "Both of you, thank you for your cooperation." Gesturing at herself, she revealed her own identity. "My name is Officer Jenny, would you like an escort to the Pokémon Center? I'm going through a pretty slow period right now so I can drive you there if you'd like on my motorbike." The young preteens looked at each other and smiled before looking back at her and nodding, thanking the pretty officer at the same time. "Thank you, Officer Jenny." She smiled as well after looking at the mangled bike on the sidewalk. "Looks like you could use it too. One of you can hold that thing in the sidecar on the way. Just let me lock up and then I'll meet you over at the garage door." Jenny went back inside to lock up after that, leaving Ash and Misty to walk over and wait for her next to the small garage that was built onto the side of the police station. Although, he first had to go and retrieve his new friend's destroyed bike for her. A short time later the metal door slid open and Jenny could be seen inside of the parking garage sitting on a sleek-looking, white police motorbike with sirens mounted on the sides. It also had a sidecar attached to the right side of the sporty vehicle. Having replaced her hat with a blue helmet that had a clear visor, the fit policewoman looked at the kids she would be ferrying and gestured behind her. "Grab some helmets off that shelf over there behind me and then climb on, I'll get you to the center in no time." Doing as instructed, Ash and Misty walked into the very neat and well-organized garage and went up to a shelf on the back wall that had a few helmets on them identical to Jenny's own. After picking two and slipping them, Misty climbed onto the back of the bike with Jenny and Ash took the sidecar. Then, with Pikachu sitting on his lap between himself and the ruined bike that he was holding between his legs, Jenny slowly pulled out of the garage. Once they were out on the pavement of the driveway, she pressed a button on the console pad of her bike and the garage door automatically shut and locked back. Then, pulling out onto the main road, she called back to her passengers. "Hang on, we're gonna make these roads hot like slugma in a magma cone." She then hit the accelerator and sped down the road with a loud screech of the wheels as they tore up the pavement beneath. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX evening was nearly at its full coming and the skies were almost dark. The large white building with a big red ball on the top stood secure and firm in the midst of its own private lot, which was also shrouded by well-maintained trees and other shrubbery throughout its entire circumference. The oval-shaped Pokémon Center with its raised pavilion hosted many different sets of steps that lead up onto it from all sides, each one broken up by a section of neatly planted bushes. The white stone surface of the ground was free of any litter or trash whatsoever, and the large red P atop the center roof was now glowing as darkness descended, effectively turning it into a brightly shining beacon of hope for any weary trainers and their Pokémon. However, the peaceful tranquility of the atmosphere was soon to be broken since, unseen by all eyes, an invisible foe was slowly lowering itself down into the lot behind the large medical building. As the hidden object in question came closer to reaching its intended landing zone, the foreign invader finally started to become clear since, like a Kecleon shedding its camouflage, the odd craft in question became visible. As if it had been painted to blend into the scenery, but a pail of water had washed it away, the slow-moving object was soon revealed to be none other than a hot air balloon. A flying craft which was actually shaped to resemble a Meowth's head and paw. An exceedingly strange sight indeed. However, what was more important were the three individuals riding in the green basket directly beneath the balloon itself. Even more surprising was that, as the engine-less transportation aircraft finally reached the ground and silently touched down upon the stone surface, the passengers' identities became clear. The one was a woman with dark magenta hair and the other, a man with light blue hair. They were both wearing the same white uniforms with a big red R on their chests, and from their faces, it was clear that they were the same individuals from the wanted poster back at the police station. As the balloon settled on the ground, the woman jumped out first and landed on her long, black, high-heeled boots that went up to her knees. She was also wearing long black gloves that reached to her elbows and a very short white skirt that showed her smooth upper thighs, which, combined with the matching top, did little to conceal her shapely form and long legs. She smirked haughtily and looked around. Such a sleepy little city, we were able to get here with no interruption or suspicion. It's almost too easy, really. The man jumped down after his curvaceous female companion and showed that he too was wearing black boots, though they were shorter in length and his long white pants were tucked into them. He was wearing gloves also, but they only went to his forearms. Well then, I guess their lack of proper security is on them, he replied with an uppity laugh that made him sound like some rich snob. Like they could ever hope to prepare for the illustrious Team Rocket. Yeah, well, don't forget Jamesy boy. A high-pitched, somewhat accented voice spoke just before another figure jumped out of the balloon and landed on 2 feet between them. Da cloaken tech in da balloon made it easy by turning us invisible. The speaker turned out to be none other than a Meowth, whom was actually standing on 2 legs like a person and smirking with his paws on his hips. They really hooked us up back at headquarters with this beauty. The astonishingly talking Pokémon reached back and patted the green basket of the balloon. Yes, and now it's time to pay back the boss by snatching him some rare Pokémon, the long-haired woman snidely remarked as she crossed her arms and looked back at the center. Right, James? Right. The man now known as James flipped his hair back and then looked over at his companion. We still going with the original plan, Jesse? The now identified and skimpily dressed young woman nodded. Of course. She then looked down at the talking Pokémon beside her. Give us the rundown again, Meowth. The self-named Pokémon in question just stepped forward a few paces and looked at the center for several moments before beginning to respond. Da plan is pretty simple, and if ya follow my instructions, we shouldn't have too many issues with it. The talking Meowth raised his paw and looked across between smug and confident. First things first. We're gonna have ta dig a tunnel underneath da center. After dat, we'll place charges in da hole and den go hold em up for all da Pokémon they have. Once they find out we got bombs hidden under da building, they'll give us whatever we want ta keep from getting blown all da way ta Sinnoh. Jesse and James both looked at each other and cackled gleefully before nodding. Right, let's link up our telepads and get some explosives sent over from the supply warehouse at HQ. The blue-haired man eagerly nodded to his female companion's suggestion and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black device. Holding it in his hand, it was about palm-sized and looked like a sleek, dark circular disc with a few buttons on one side and 4 metal prongs on the other. The pronged side had a sloping dip in it. Jessie likewise pulled her own out of a small inner pocket she had on the inside of her skimpy white top and held it up. Okay, let's set up the connection. Her blue-haired companion nodded and then they both walked a few feet away from each other before kneeling down and placing the black discs onto the ground. The devices in question had little feet on the bottom that held them up in a backward-leaning position, which left the button console facing the ground and the side with the metal hooks pointing skyward. They almost resembled 2 small black satellites. Even though they seemed insignificant and odd, the black discs were actually some of the most cutting-edge teleportation technology that existed in the Team Rocket organization's criminal arsenal. Indeed, working together they actually formed a 2-way teleportation gate which allowed back and forth transaction from both ends. Jesse and James took a few seconds to input a couple of commands into the intricate little control pads on the back of the black discs and then looked up as they started to activate. The metal prongs on the front side of the discs started to spark and crackle with electrical energy before, converging into one center point via multiple arcs, they erupted into a bright glow of pinkish-yellow light. At the same time, 2 beams of equally bright light erupted from the discs and met in midair, a few feet above the ground and perfectly on center. As the beams converged upon one another and combined, an even brighter light started to shine in a small portal, like a wormhole between dimensions, began to take shape. The portal itself took on the appearance of an oval and as it grew larger and more pronounced, Jesse and James both backed away a few paces to give it time to stabilize out. Finally, after several long moments, the man-made teleportation wormhole stopped increasing in size and evened out when it was about the size of a large wall mirror. The now softly gleaming portal of light hovered in place, sustained in form by the 2 arcs of oddly glowing electrical energy that were being fed into it via the discs down on the ground. After a few seconds of allowing the portal to stabilize, it started to shift and change color. Soon, the mirror of shapeless color gave way to an image that showed an entirely different scene from the landscape around the portal. Like a hole had been ripped between the veil of space and time, a man could be seen on the other end of the dimensional gateway. The man in question was smoothly shaven with dark eyes and he was wearing a black cap on his head, which covered his apparently short dark hair underneath. He also had on a black, long-sleeved shirt with the same red R on the front of it that Jesse and James themselves donned. On his hands were white gloves that went up his forearms. The man had a very serious and stony expression and in the background of wherever he was, it looked like he was in some kind of a giant warehouse. One with pallets, crates and shelves that went all the way up near the ceiling. It appeared as though he was probably standing someplace elevated as well because down on the ground and moving about the warehouse were several more men and women dressed just like him. The women, however, wore black skirts and white, thigh-high-heeled boots instead of pants and normal boots as the men did. Seeing who it was that had established the connection, the stoic-looking man frowned and then spoke in voice that showed his obvious frustration. "You 3. Oh great, what do you want?" Jesse and James both straightened up their posture as the former replied. "We need you to send us over a few crates of explosives for an operation we are about to initiate." The man raised an eyebrow. "Really? An Operation EH. Is this gonna be any more successful than the last dozen failures you've had? The equipment in this warehouse isn't for third-rate morons like you who can't even pull off a single successful heist. Some of the most high-tech and expensive inventory in the entire rocket organization are kept here." James smiled nervously and wrung his hands together. "Well, I wouldn't say we've failed that many times. Jessie, however, immediately resorted to anger as she growled and shook a fist at their Team Rocket comrade. Listen you. It isn't your job to tell us what we can and can't have. We're equal parts of this organization just the same as you, and besides, you aren't our superior. Now give us what we called for. Rolling his eyes, he sighed and shook his head. Whatever. You mess up, it's on you. I'll have your order filled and sent through one of the teleporter pads. Stand by. With that, the image in the portal went back to taking on the form of a shining surface of light. However, after a few minutes of impatiently waiting and tapping her foot, Jessie smiled in satisfaction as the portal began shifting and distorting again. Finally, took them long enough. Her words were followed by the portal growing and expanding in size until it eventually touched down on the ground and started to resemble more of a doorway. The brightness of it continued to get stronger and stronger until all three of them had to finally look away. When the glowing died down and they were able to look again, they saw that, in place of the portal, there were now 5 large crates of explosive munitions resting on the concrete ground. The black discs that had made the portal were also inactive now, having returned to their resting state after the teleportation transaction had been completed. Now that's what I'm talking about. Meowth cheered as he ran up to the pallet of explosives and started to look them over. With this we'll be able to get those saps in the Pokémon Center right where we want them, Jessie foretold with a sneer. James agreed with her and crossed his arms, smirking. We'll have enough firepower to blow them to the moon and back. All right. Meowth turned around and looked back at his teammates while grinning toothily. Time for the next phase of the plan. The 2 human members of the trio went over and picked up the small black discs, storing them away in their uniforms again while the talking Pokémon raised a clawed finger. Now we'll need to tunnel our way under the center and then place these charges. After that, we can begin phase 2 of the plan, stealing all the Pokémon. With that, they ran over to the back of the Pokémon Center, and as soon as they reached the southward-facing wall, Meowth stopped and pointed down at the ground. Here, Jess. Have Ekans burrow underneath the building right here. Pulling a Pokeball out from inside of her white vest, which she kept attached to a small loop, the reddish-haired female criminal sneered. It'd be my pleasure. Ekans, come out here. With that, she released the Pokémon from within, which appeared from the ball in a bright burst of light and materialized to show the long purple snake that was Ekans. Giving a hiss of its name when it took full form and shape, the poison-type Pokémon looked up at Jessie, whom pointed in turn to the spot on the ground that Meowth had directed. Ekans, I want you to burrow a deep hole underneath this building and get right under the center of it. Nodding at its given command, Jessie's loyal serpent hissed again before turning and looking down at the ground. After that, with a strong recoil and forward fling of its body, Ekans threw itself into the concrete ground. However, instead of bouncing back or hurting itself, the powerful snake was able to smash right through the solid ground and immediately begin burrowing a tunnel straight under the Pokémon Center. Smirking as they watched, Jessie cackled. It won't be long now. I hope there's rare Pokémon in this center, James stated while flipping his hair back. Just you watch, Meowth began with a confident smirk. This plan'll work out perfectly. We'll get a bunch of Pokémon and da boss'll finally make me top cat again. The 2 simple-minded humans with him just raised their hands and cheered. And we're gonna get a raise and a promotion. Woohoo! XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX approached the tall, glowing form of the Pokémon Center at a reasonable speed. While not going at a breakneck, ballistic pace by any definition of the word, the female officer still had a heavy foot and she was able to ferry them across town just as fast as she promised. In only a short few moments, Jenny was pulling up in front of the large building and stopped just outside on the street corner. Ash and Misty got off and removed their helmets while the former carried the ruined bicycle out after him. "Thanks for the lift, Officer Jenny," Misty said gratefully. "We really appreciate it." Ash nodded and Pikachu smiled and chirped in agreement. "Yeah, we do, thanks officer. You helped get us here a lot quicker than we would have on foot." The shapely policewoman smiled at the two kids and waved to them. It was no problem. Now you kids stay safe, don't get into any trouble and make sure you watch out for those Pokémon kidnappers, okay? Ash and Misty agreeing to her request, Jenny saluted them and then pulled her bike around and drove off while yelling back. Tell Joy I said hey. With that, the two traveling trainers turned and walked up the steps that lead onto the raised pavilion that the center was located upon. A short time later, they were stepping through the front doors and entering a massive lobby that looked big enough to hold a large crowd of people and Pokémon. There was an oval-shaped front desk at the center of the lobby and a video call station on the far right end. There was also a second level to the center which had a walkway stretching from one end of the lobby to the other on the back wall. The front door area was entirely comprised of a long glass surface. Together, the two pre-teens walked up to the desk and, not seeing anyone, Misty pressed a button that was attached to a device on the counter and read, "For assistance please press pager." When she did, a loud buzzing sound filtered out through the Pokeball-shaped speakers suspended above the front desk and alerted the center attendant that there were patrons. In what could only have been a minute, at the most, the double doors at the back of the lobby opened and out came walking a young woman with pink hair tied into what looked like two bows behind her head and ending in a puffy crown at her forehead. She had a soft complexion, blue eyes and was wearing a very short and visually appealing nurse's uniform. At least, to Ash's eyes it was appealing. The outfit in question consisted of a white apron-like dress with a pocket down on the left side of the material near the belly. The apron was tied into a bow behind her and underneath of it she wore a pink, short-sleeved shirt with a folded-down collar and puffy shoulders. On her feet were white nurse's shoes. The pink-headed young woman walked up to the counter and smiled upon seeing her waiting visitors. Hello and welcome to the Viridian City Pokémon Center. My name is Nurse Joy, how may I help you? Pikachu jumped off of Ash's shoulder and onto the counter just as he responded. Can you please heal our Pokémon up for us Nurse Joy? Misty took her red pack off and opened it, reaching inside and pulling out 3 Pokeballs. Yes please Nurse Joy, we would really appreciate it. The Pokémon health care professional smiled sweetly. Well of course we will. She then pressed a button on the intercom system behind the desk and spoke into the microphone. We need a transport table out here for 2 teams. Shortly after saying that, the doors in the back opened again and out came 2 Chansey pushing a big cart with 2 trays on top that had slots in them for Pokeballs. The normal type egg bearers hurried up to the counter with one of them looking at Nurse Joy and nodding. Chansey. Smiling at her assistant, Joy thanked the round-shaped Pokémon. Thank you Chansey, go ahead and place the Pokeballs onto the cart and then take them back. I'll be there in a minute. Doing as told, they both took the shrunken-down balls from Ash and Misty and put them into the trays on the cart. Saying his goodbyes with Pikachu, the messy-haired boy watched him jump onto the cart willingly and then disappear through the double doors a few seconds later. Okay, we'll take your Pokémon back for a nice long rest under the PRM and then we'll bring them out to you once it's finished. It shouldn't take too long. Nurse Joy then looked at the mangled bike Ash was carrying and gasped. Oh no. Did something happen? Misty, for her part, just sighed. It's a long story but no one got hurt, that's all that matters. My bike is just wrecked now and I won't be able to use it like this. Joy tapped her chin in thought for a few moments before smiling. Oh I know. There's a bike shop here in town that could probably fix your bike for you if it isn't too destroyed. I'll give you the address before you leave and you can try taking it there. Brightening at that, Misty smiled gratefully. Really? Oh thank you Nurse Joy. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, she answered kindly in turn. And since it's getting late, may I recommend you both stay here for the night once your Pokémon are done. We have rooms here. The 2 kids looked at each other and smiled. Sure Nurse Joy, thanks. We'll just get a room after you square away our Pokémon. Oh and by the way, Officer Jenny wanted us to tell you hello. The pretty nurse tilted her head and smiled. So you already met Jenny then huh? I hope you two didn't get into any trouble. Misty shook her head. No she actually gave us a lift here. Joy nodded in understanding. Well that was nice of her. Though I'm not surprised, while she can be stern, Jenny has a heart of gold. I should know, we've been friends for years. The young nurse then held up her finger. Well then, we'll come get you as soon as your Pokémon are ready. In the meantime, please make yourselves comfortable. After she walked off, Ash looked at his female companion. Hey, I'm gonna go call my mom and see how she's doing. You wanna come? The petite oranguette shrugged. Sure, don't really have anything better to do while we're waiting. She then followed the younger boy as he walked over to the video phones and, after sitting himself down, Ash picked up the phone and dialed his home number. Once the black screen and call icon came on, the computer rung for a few moments before the call was finally connected and Ash Ketchum answered. As soon as Ash saw her, he figured that his mother was doing her nightly rituals since she had a towel on her head, a green mud mask on her face and a pink bathrobe on with a red sash around the waist. Hey mom, did I call at a bad time? He asked in amusement when he saw the state of his mother. Eyes brightening happily as she saw her son on the other end of the line, Delia smiled and exclaimed. Oh Ash, it's you. No sweetie, it isn't a bad time at all, just give me a second. She then turned away from the video phone, which was set up in the living room on a desk near the TV, and ran upstairs as fast as she could. Once in the bathroom she had in her bedroom, she removed the towel covering her hair and quickly took off her mud mask before running back downstairs and sitting in front of the phone. Smiling excitedly, she looked at her son and said just as enthusiastically. Oh sweetie, it's so good to hear from you. I've been worrying about you so much over the last 2 weeks, how has everything been? Are you eating enough? How's Pikachu? Did you catch any new Pokémon? Are you making sure to regularly change your... With Misty beside him, Ash interrupted his mother before she could go any farther and embarrass him. Mom, hey come on mom, I'm fine, really. And yeah, it's been really great. Leaning forward, he smiled. Me and Pikachu did some pretty tough training for 2 weeks and yes, I did catch some new Pokémon. All in all, it's been good. We just arrived here at the center in Viridian City and we're waiting for Nurse Joy to take care of our Pokémon for us. She smiled happily at the good news from her child. That is so wonderful sweetheart, you're already starting to succeed in leaps and bounds. Even though you took longer to get to Viridian than your father did since you stopped to train for a while, he told me that when he first left home on his journey, everything was a disaster. Nothing went right for him. He even told me that a flock of Spearow attacked him. She and her son both shared an amused smile and a laugh at that, but, upon seeing Misty next to him, Delia adopted an expression of curiosity. Ash, who is that with you? Looking at Misty, the boy smiled and then glanced back at his mother. Oh yeah right, Mom, this is my friend Misty. We met her when we were on the way here to Viridian City. At that, the younger girl moved in and smiled politely at the older woman. Hello Mrs. Ketchum. Ash told me a lot about you on the way here to the city and it's nice getting to talk to you. Delia eyes smiled at the orange head. Oh you are just as pretty as a blossom dear. It's so nice to meet you too Misty, I'm happy my Ash has already made a friend on the road. And such a pretty one too. Misty's cheeks turned a little red at that but she retained her composure as she gave a small laugh. Well I should actually be thankful that I met Ash really. He and Pikachu came along when I was being attacked by a wild Gyarados in a river and they saved me. If it wouldn't have been for them, I might not be here right now. I owe them both my life. Ash even carried my bike, which Gyarados destroyed in its attack, all the way here for me on his shoulders. Your son is a real gentleman Mrs. Ketchum. Delia's eyes went wide. Really? A Gyarados? He saved you from a Gyarados? At the girl's nod, she looked at her son. Ash, that was so incredibly brave of you. I'm terrified to hear that such a thing happened to you and I'm relieved to know you're okay, but to be told that you went to such lengths to save this young lady. And then to carry her bike all the way to the city for her. She smiled and leaned forward. That makes me so proud of you sweetie. You did a wonderful thing and you should be very proud of yourself, I know your father would be too. Good job Ash, I am so proud of you. Feeling a little uncomfortable at all the praise, he smiled and rubbed the back of his head while changing the subject. Yeah so how's everything there mom? You doing okay? Leaning back in the desk chair again, his mother nodded with a small sigh. Yes, I'm doing just fine, honey. It's a little lonely without you around, but I'm managing well, don't you worry about me. She then held up a finger like she had suddenly remembered something important. That reminds me, Ash, you need to call Professor Oak too. He's really been wondering about your progress and how you've been doing over the last 2 weeks, so make sure to call him, okay? Her son nodded in assent. You got it, Mom, I will. I should actually probably let you go now so I can call him before it gets too late. I just wanted to call and let you know how I was doing. The brunette nodded in agreement and smiled into the camera again. Yes, you're probably right. Well, thank you for calling and letting me know how you are, honey. Please keep me updated and call home anytime you feel like it. I love you so very much and I couldn't be prouder of the young man you're turning into. She then looked toward the girl next to her son. And Misty, it was so nice to talk to you. If you and my son end up traveling together by some chance, then I hope to actually meet you in person someday. Please take care, dear, and if you go with him, help look after my Ashie. Misty smiled kindly back and nodded. You got it, Mrs. Ketchum, and it was very nice meeting you as well. Have a good night. With that, Ash told his mother goodbye and gave her his love before hanging up the call. Afterwards, he turned and went to say something to Misty before calling Professor Oak, but right then, his eyes caught sight of a strange anomaly. Standing up, he furrowed his eyebrows and then walked forward a few steps to see what had caught his attention. Once he did, with Misty looking after him in confusion, he finally was able to see just what it was that had grabbed his attention. There, suspended on the wall behind the front desk, was a large monitor. However, it wasn't the screen itself but what was currently being displayed on its surface that had caught his eyes. There, taking up the whole large screen, was the computer image of 4 individual Pokémon that were drawn on what seemed to be some form of ancient stone. As he moved closer to the image that was being displayed on the monitor, Ash examined the 4 drawings carefully in order to decipher what they were. It took him a little while, but after intently staring at each one for some time, he finally understood who the Pokémon were. Ash, what is it? Misty asked as she walked up to stand beside of him. Turning to look at her, the boy gestured back up at the image while explaining. This image caught my eye. It may just be a digital replica, but this picture must have been taken from an actual ancient drawing of 4 unique Pokémon. She looked up at the image as well and stared at it for a few moments. Who are they? Ash reverted his full attention to the image and then pointed, one after the other. Well, the first is of an Arcanine. They're pretty rare in the wild and used to be classified as legendary Pokémon back when Professor Oak was younger, though I don't know why. An enthusiastic smile came over his features then. These other 3 are real legendary Pokémon. The Mirage Trio and legendary birds of Kanto, Zapdos, Moltres and Articuno. Misty shared his enthusiasm as she stared at the image and smiled fondly. Wow, wouldn't it be amazing to actually get to see those Pokémon someday? Her male companion nodded in agreement and then, after a few more moments of staring, he looked away. Alright, well, I should call Professor Oak and let him know how things are going. Misty readjusted the bag slung over her shoulder. I'm gonna go find the bathroom while you're doing that. See you in a little bit, Ash. After she had wandered off, Ash went back over to the video phone and sat down before making the call to his mentor. It didn't take long either because, in only a few short rings, the screen lit up and Professor Oak's face could be seen on the other end of the computer. Seeing who had called him, the elder man smiled and gave a hearty greeting. Ah, Ash, so you finally made it to Viridian City. How did your first 2 weeks go? The boy smiled fondly at the memories. It went great, Professor, really. Me and Pikachu did a lot of training and I caught a few Pokémon. I captured a Rattata, a Spearow, the Nidoran duo, and get this, I actually found a Badoo. Hearing that, Oak's eyebrow arched. A Badoo? Really? How in Arceus Green Earth did that happen? He shrugged. I don't know, Professor, I really don't. All I do know is that I found her getting attacked by a flock of Spearow, headed by the one I caught, and saved her. Sometime after that I caught her when she expressed interest in coming with me. The aged Pokémon professor put a hand to his chin and hummed in thought. Very strange indeed to have encountered a wild Badoo out here in Kanto, they usually aren't found here. Interesting indeed my boy, and regardless, it was a stroke of good fortune for you that you made such a rare capture. It sounds like you're doing quite well for yourself already. Ash nodded in agreement. Yeah we are, so far at least. Me and Pikachu met a girl named Misty, who we saved from a Gyarados, but it destroyed her bike in the attack. We decided to come with her to Viridian and I carried it here for her. We're in the Pokémon Center right now waiting for our Pokémon to get rested up and will probably crash here tonight. The older man smiled at his student. It sounds to me like you've already experienced quite the adventure my boy. Well, make sure to keep me up to date on how things go with you and I look forward to hearing what Pokémon you catch next. Do you know where you're going after this? The black-haired trainer nodded again. Yeah, I spent the last 2 weeks looking over the GPS in my X-transceiver and I think we'll head through the Viridian Forest next and onto Pewter City. His mentor laced his fingers together. Well, that sounds like a plan to me, Ash. Just be careful though, the Viridian Forest can be a dangerous place. You got it, Professor, he assented with a nod. We'll be safe and I'll call you again as soon as I have another chance. Just then, with those last words, his memory was suddenly jogged and Ash snapped his fingers. That reminds me, Professor, can I please ask you a favor? About my Pokémon. The short-haired older man nodded. Of course my boy, what might it be? Leaning his elbows on the desk, the boy explained. Well, I want my Pokémon to keep up their training schedules, even when they're with you at the lab. But they can't make their own food and I have a specific diet I'm keeping each of them on. If I sent you a list and kept it updated, could you please keep up their meal plan when they're with you? His mentor smiled in reply. Of course Ash, it would be my pleasure. I'm sure your mother wouldn't mind coming over to help me every now and again to give her something to do either. She's a far better cook than I am after all. Do you need me to supervise their training as well? Ash shook his head. No, I've already talked to them about it. They understand that when they're with you, I still want them to do their daily training regimes. You won't have to do anything on that end. The world-famous researcher nodded once more. Well then you can consider it done. Don't worry about your Pokémon's feeding schedule when they're with me my boy. Smiling gratefully, he bowed his head and thanked his teacher. That really sets my mind at ease, Professor, thank you. With that and a few parting words, the call was ended and Ash sat back in the chair. He purposefully avoided making any mention of his sighting of Ho-Oh to anyone, mostly because he feared that most people would never believe it. It was hard enough for him to believe it, let alone trying to convince anybody else. Eventually, as the time ticked by on the clock, Ash and Misty were pulled out of conversation with each other over by the waiting area when Nurse Joy walked out into the lobby with both Chansey pushing a cart behind her. On top of it were their Pokeballs and Pikachu, looking freshly rejuvenated and perky as he ate an apple. Well, it's all done, she spoke kindly as she stopped in front of them. Your Pokémon have been fully restored and are back to optimal health. We did a full exam on all of them and they are healthy as can be. Pikachu, seeing Ash, jumped off the cart and onto his trainer's shoulder, who smiled up at him and chuckled. Hey buddy, you feeling good? The small electric type nodded and replied back happily. Pika Pi Pikachu. He and Misty then took their Pokeballs and both thanked the pretty nurse before the former asked. Do you think we might be able to get a room for the night, please, Nurse Joy? Misty and I talked about it and we'd like to stay here. Of course. The pink-haired nurse smiled sweetly. If you'll just come up to the front desk then I'll register you both and give you a key. Just as he and Misty prepared to follow Joy and do just that, the sound of breaking glass caused the three of them to spin back around toward the entry doors. Just as they did, two black balls came flying through the now shattered front doors and landed on the floor in front of them just a few feet away. Before they could react, both balls exploded and set off a flash bang that rung in their ears and kicked up a cloud of black smoke. The three of them, including Pikachu and the two Chansey, started to cough from the thick screen of smoke and covered their eyes. Amidst their coughing, they suddenly heard two voices, a male and a female one, start to speak. The female one went first. "Prepare for trouble. And make it double." The male voice followed. "To protect the world from devastation." The woman passionately proclaimed. "To unite all peoples within our nations." The man said smoothly. "To denounce the evils of truth and love." Her voice spoke the sardonic next lines, followed by the man again. "To extend our reach to the stars above." The smoke finally cleared and allowed Ash, Misty and Joy to see the identity of the intruders just as the woman stepped forward and crossed her arms. "Jesse. James." The man also stepped forward and crossed his own arms before flipping his blue hair. Team Rocket blasts off at the speed of light. She jammed a finger into the air. "Surrender now or prepare to fight." The blue-haired male did the same and smirked. "Meowth, that's right." In the middle of the two humans jumped an upright Meowth on both feet, paws on his hips while he finished the strange motto. Seeing this, Joy and both kids stared at him in wonder and yelled at the same time. "A talking Meowth." The two-legged feline in question grinned toothily and crossed his arms. "I can do a lot more than just talk, you know. Stealin' Pokémon is what I'm really good at." Ash blinked in shock before pointing at the small talking normal type. "But how are you walking like that, and talking? That's amazing." Meowth closed his eyes and looked satisfied with himself. "I know I'm awesome, but flattery won't save ya or any of da Pokémon here, kid, so save ya breath." "Wait a minute." Misty narrowed her eyes at the two uniformed intruders behind the talking Pokémon and then gasped. "You two are the same ones from the wanted poster outside of the police station." The woman, whose magenta hair was pulled back into a long banana shape that went down to her legs, sneered and folded her arms under her bust. "That's right, little girl. We're members of the indomitable Team Rocket and we are here to show you just how bad we really are. We were able to easily slip into this city without anyone even recognizing or seeing us. Tisk, tisk, you really should be more on guard when bad guys like us are afoot." James spoke those taunting words with a small chuckle. At that, Joy finally asked with a nervous tremble in her voice. "Why are you here?" The criminal duo laughed at the same time as Jesse pointed at the nurse. "Why, we're here to steal all the Pokémon in this center, of course." Meowth cackled and held up his paw in a fist. "Yeah, so hand 'em all over and no one gets hurt." "Oh yeah," Ash spoke defiantly while stepping forward. "And what if we don't?" The talking Pokémon cackled again. "Then we'll just blow the whole place sky high." Seeing the look of shock pass across their faces, he smirked. "Yeah, that's right. We planted bombs under the center and dear time to go off." James pulled out a small, square black box out of his pocket and held it up. "We also have it remote set so we can blow the charges any time we want to." Ash, Misty and Joy all gasped in shock and leaned back for a moment while the pink-haired nurse put her hands over her mouth. "That's horrible. How could you?" The villains laughed and Jesse sneered. "Because we're bad, of course. Now hand over all the Pokémon here or else." Ash was gritting his teeth and staring daggers at them for a few moments, his mind working rapidly, before he slowly calmed and then smirked. "Yeah, right, you're just bluffing." Misty and Joy looked at him in confusion, trying to figure out what he was doing, while the Rocket trio laughed again. "Oh really?" Jessie crossed her arms under her impressive bust again. "And how are you so sure of that, little boy?" He maintained his smirk and pointed. "Because, you came here to steal Pokémon, not blow yourselves up. You're in the building, if you remote detonated it then you'd go up in flames too. You probably set the timer far enough out that you would have enough time to intimidate Nurse Joy, get the Pokémon and then leave. And besides, you're criminals, you don't care, you would let this place blow up anyway, whether you got what you wanted or not." They frowned slightly upon hearing that, and the woman of the group, apparently the leader, retorted coldly back. "Well, aren't you just the little brainiac? Even if you're right, we can still get what we came for by force. What makes you think you can stop us?" "Because." Pikachu, on cue, jumped down from his shoulder onto the floor and angrily crackled his cheeks. "We won't let you." Ash finished with a serious and stony expression on his face. "That's right." Misty stepped up beside him and held up a Pokeball in her hand, which grew. We'll fight you off and defend this center and all the Pokémon in it." Jessie and James both laughed together again, along with Meowth, before the former asked with hands on her hips. "Oh really? You think little children like yourselves would stand a chance against us?" "It's getting late, Jess, and I think it might be getting to the little brats," James jeered. "They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, we'd wiped off floor with ya." Meowth pointed and glinted his sharp white teeth. Ash and Misty, both, remained steadfast and unmoved, glaring steadily at the three criminals without backing down an inch. Seeing this, Jessie smirked condescendingly. "Very well, I guess we need to teach the babies a lesson." She and her partner both pulled out a Pokeball from in their uniforms at the same time, and Jessie twirled around before tossing the ball out of her hand. "Here we go, kiddies, watch closely. Come out, Ekans." From the ball emerged the long, purple and poisonous serpent Pokémon, who hissed threateningly upon appearing. James, for his part, flipped his hair and smirked before tossing his own Pokeball into the air. "Come on, coughing." Appearing in a burst of light next to Ekans was a floating ball of grayish rock that had craters over all its body, a mouth and two leering eyes. Upon making its entry, a quick burst of smoke came from the craters in it as coughing gave a guttural and deep, coughing. "All right, let's make this fair." Misty threw the Pokeball in her hand. "Go Staryu." When the red and white ball snapped open, it released a stream of light from within that took the form of a golden-brown star-shaped Pokémon with a red gem in its center. Appearing next to Pikachu, it readied itself for battle and gave a brisk vocalization. "Star. You ready, Misty?" Ash spoke as he prepared for his first official battle. "Let's do it," the redhead affirmed without fear. "HMPH. This will be over quickly. Ekans, use Poison Sting on that little rat," Jessie commanded. Rearing up, the purple snake opened its mouth and started firing multiple bursts of glowing white needles at Pikachu. However, they were both ready and Ash proved it. "Use Quick Attack." In a small blast of white energy, Pikachu took off running across the floor at rapid speed. The rain of poisonous needles missed him entirely as he simply feinted to the side and made a straight charge for Ekans. Taken aback by the speed of Pikachu, Jessie blinked and then shook herself from her stupor. "Ekans, don't stop. Keep using Poison Sting." Her serpentine Pokémon did just that and continued using the same attack to try and hit the other one. Unfortunately, Pikachu proved to be far too quick and was easily able to dodge each blast of needles that came his way. James took that time to command his own Pokémon. Coughing used Sludge Attack. The toxic and cratered poison type moved fast and expelled a thick shot of purple goo at Staryu. Misty proved to also be quick on reaction though, since she gave her own Pokémon a swift order. Staryu spin away from that sludge and then used Tackle. Displaying impressive speed and agility of its own, Staryu jumped and spun out of the way of the flying ball of goop and then sent itself twirling rapidly through the air like a frisbee. Before Coughing could move or react, Staryu smashed its hard body straight into the levitating Pokémon and sent it soaring back through the air. At the same time, Pikachu finally reached Ekans and jumped forward, slamming himself into the slippery serpent like a compact yellow missile. Jessie's Pokémon also went flying, but unlike Coughing, it actually hit the ground. More than a little surprised at the prowess of both young trainers and their Pokémon, the two criminal rockets got mad and clenched their hands into fists. "That's it, you little punks," Jessie growled. "You'll pay for that." James raised his hand. Coughing used Smokescreen. With a throaty groan of its name, Coughing started to expel a thick cloud of black smoke into the lobby, which quickly came to fill the airspace and cut off almost all visibility. "Crap, now we can't see anything," Misty cursed in frustration. Before Ash could reply, they heard Jessie yell, "Ekans, find that little rodent and then use Wrap and bind it." Utilizing its ability to sense body temperature, Ekans slithered quickly into the cloud of smoke and started searching for Pikachu. Locking onto his body heat eventually, the sneaky snake slipped in deftly behind the unaware and blind electric type and then struck, lunging at him and wrapping its strong coils around the small mouse tightly. Ash could hear Pikachu cry out in surprise from within the smoke cloud, but without being able to see, he knew he couldn't help his Pokémon. However, instead of panicking, he remained calm as Professor Oak had always instructed him to do in such situations. Thankfully, he soon came to an idea and spoke on it while looking at Misty. "Hey, does your Staryu know rapid spin?" She looked at him oddly for a moment but nodded regardless. "Yeah, why?" He turned to her. "Have it use rapid spin but while standing on the ground. Maybe, if it does that, Staryu's body could act like a fan and stir up enough air to clear the smoke away." She blinked in surprise at the unusually unique idea but decided to try it nonetheless as she ordered Staryu to do exactly as Ash advised. Amazingly enough, as soon as the multi-pointed star used rapid spin while standing on the floor, its body started to rotate at an incredibly fast speed. This had the effect of stirring up the air around them and, the faster Staryu turned, it soon resembled a fan pushing air currents forward briskly. The sudden uptick in wind speed caused the cloud of black smog to slowly begin dissipating and fading away until, finally, it was no more. With visibility finally restored, Ash was able to see Ekans in the middle of a tight bind on Pikachu, who was trying to get free but could not do so. At that same moment, Jessie called out, "Ekans, use bite and gobble up that tiny rat." Just as the toxic snake opened its mouth wide and bared its fangs in preparation to bite Pikachu, Misty acted on the fly. Staryu attack Ekans with rapid spin. Unlike before, the quick-moving water type went airborne again but this time started spinning through the air at revolutions that left the head dizzy. In no time at all, Staryu reached Ekans just before it was able to bite Pikachu and then struck it with full-force rotational speed. This caused the legless reptile to careen back from the hit and its coils also loosened up a little. On the heels of that, Misty yelled, "Now use Swift." From the gem in its center, Staryu came out of its spin and then started raining dozens of sharp energy stars at Ekans. The double attack caused it to totally loosen its grip on Pikachu and thereby allowed him to quickly jump free. At that same moment, James pointed at Staryu and commanded, "Coughing, use tackle on that pesky starfish." Thinking it would have an opening since Staryu was facing away, Coughing flew in and attempted to ram Misty's Pokémon. Sadly for it though, that effort came up short since Pikachu, eager to return the favor, leapt to Staryu's defense and jumped in the air to meet Coughing. Tail glowing silver as he used a proper iron tail in battle for the very first time, demonstrating all the grueling work he had put in by painfully striking his tail on hard, rocky surfaces every day. The agile electric type flipped once in the air. Then, face scrunched up intently, he brought his now steely appendage down on the hard surface of Coughing's head with a loud, "Pika." The brutal attack was more than enough to stop Coughing and, in fact, sent it tumbling back through the air and landing on the ground near James's feet. While Ash gave a quick cheer at the successful usage of Pikachu's hard-earned new move, Misty called for Staryu to use Bubble Beam on Ekans. In a flurry of large and small bubbles, the water-type starfish overwhelmed its opponent in short order and sent Ekans off in the same manner as Coughing, landing at Jessie's own feet in 5 seconds flat. While both members of the secretive and nefarious criminal organization looked down at their Pokémon in stunned surprise, Ash grinned and clenched his right fist. "You ready to end this, Misty?" She smiled in a similarly eager manner and nodded. "Let's do it." With that, the black-haired boy pointed and called out, "Pikachu, use Thunderbolt." His orange-haired companion looked at her Pokémon and gave her own final order for the battle. "Staryu, use Water Gun." At the same time, both the electric and water type readied their attacks before releasing them at the same time. For Staryu, it expelled a blast of high-powered water from one of its points and Pikachu's whole body crackled with electricity before he unleashed a powerful bolt of lightning with a loud cry of, "Chew!" Jessie, James and Meowth's eyes widened just before the surge of water and the bolt of electrical energy merged into one dual attack and struck, not merely Ekans and Coughing, but even they themselves. "Yahhhhhh!" The criminal trio yelled aloud as they were electrocuted by Pikachu's powerful electric-type attack and became lit up like a host of brightly shining lanterns. An attack which was made all the worse by the aquatic conductor of Staryu's water gun. When the combination attack finally ended, All three rockets were left standing in awkwardly comedic poses while they jittered and jumped from the electricity still coursing through their bodies. Jesse and James's outfits were smoking and singed, and even Meowth's fur was standing on end. Ekans and Coughing were laying unconscious at their feet. Yes. Ash pumped his fist into the air and cheered. We did it, Pikachu. We won our first battle. Turning to his trainer, the electric rodent cast his arms into the air and joined Ash in celebration while Misty praised Staryu for its own efforts. Misty, that was great, the young man said enthusiastically as he turned to her and grinned. You and Staryu were incredible. She turned to face him and offered her own cheerful smile. Thanks, you and Pikachu were great too, especially for your first battle. We worked well together. After that, he looked back at Team Rocket and smirked. You guys finished yet, or do you want more? We can keep it coming as long as you like. Shaking themselves from their electrified stupor, Jesse and James looked at each other and then down at their beaten Pokémon before the latter blinked in amazement. I can't believe we lost. Jesse growled angrily and glared daggers at the ones who defeated them. You pesky little brats. How dare you? All three of them quickly took a step back in fear though when Pikachu bounded forward and started crackling electricity in his cheek pouches. Seeing this, they sweat dropped nervously, wanting nothing to do with getting shocked again by the surprisingly powerful little electric type. Maybe we should call it quits and get out of here, Meowth suggested as he backed up toward the door. I agree with him, Jesse, that Pikachu's too strong, James tremulously declared with a shudder before looking down at the detonator switch he had been holding in his hand, which had been fried by Pikachu's thunderbolt. The detonator's been destroyed too, we can't set off the explosives anymore by remote. Gritting her teeth, the magenta-haired woman finally relented. Fine, we'll pull back for now. She then pointed at Ash and Misty. But this isn't over, you little twerps. You'll pay for interfering with Team Rocket. With that, she and James returned their defeated Pokémon and then turned tail with Meowth and ran back out the door. However, not wanting them to get away, Ash took off after them while yelling, "Hey, get back here, you three!" As he ran through the lobby after them, Pikachu on his heels, Misty quickly returned Staryu and yelled after him. Ash, wait up! The two of them hardly made it to the door though before James turned back and, grabbing a strange black ball out of his pants pocket, he tossed it onto the ground near their feet. Immediately, it exploded into a cloud of thick smoke and halted Ash and Misty in their tracks, both of them hacking and coughing from the offensive screen of smog. After a few moments of struggling through the smoke cloud, the two of them finally got out of it and looked around for any sign of Team Rocket. They soon found it too, in the form of a large hot air balloon flying over their heads high above the center. Looking up, they saw the villainous trio making their getaway and Meowth calling down to them mockingly while Jesse and James stood smirking in the basket. Hey twerps, I'd hurry up and get out of here if I was you. In a little bit that whole place is going up in smoke. Ha 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 ha. James, beside of him, made a gesture in his hand like a bomb going off. Boom. The three of them cackled at that, but Ash just growled and pointed up at them. You criminals aren't gonna get away with this. Pikachu use Thunderbolt and take him down. Backing up a short distance away, Pikachu narrowed his eyes and focused before taking off at a fast run. Then, as soon as he reached Ash, the agile and quick little mouse jumped onto his trainer's shoulder before springing off of it and high into the air. All of his strength training proved itself valuable in that very moment. While he was airborne, Pikachu's small body became suffused in bright electricity before he unleashed it with a loud, "Pika!" To the Rocket Trio's shock and dread, the powerful bolt of electricity soared through the air like a sharp arrow and struck them head-on. The three of them were soon given the second shock of their lives and cried out in pain as the whole balloon was lit up by the bolt of thunder. Finally, after only seconds, the charge reached its max and caused a fiery explosion. From the smoke went hurtling Jesse, James and Meowth, once more smoking and singed as they flew high into the sky above the city. I can't believe this happened to us. Jesse whined indignantly while hanging upside down. I can't believe my uniform got so tattered and torn up. James complained as he pulled at the ruined sleeve of his uniform. I can't believe we lost our balloon with my pretty mug on it. Meowth cried, his tail still smoking. Then, just before disappearing into the night sky, the three of them called out together at the same time. Team Rocket's blasting off. Down on the ground, Ash watched the three criminals vanish into the distance with satisfaction while bits and pieces of their destroyed balloon fell to the ground. However, he and Pikachu had no time to celebrate since Misty quickly grabbed his arm. Ash, we need to hurry. The explosives they placed under the center could go off at any minute. He looked at her and nodded urgently. You're right, come on. With that, the two of them ran back inside and found Nurse Joy behind the front desk frantically typing away on her computer. As soon as they reached her, Ash slammed his hand on the counter. Nurse Joy, it's not over yet. Those bombs Team Rocket placed under this building could detonate any time now. She looked up at him and nodded intently, showing that she very well understood the gravity of the situation. Yes, I know. I already called the police and informed Officer Jenny. But we have a bigger problem. Her brow furrowed in concern. We have a lot of Pokémon here at this center, and if it blows up, all of them will go with it. There are too many Pokéballs to get out manually, and letting them all out would only cause mass confusion. We need to evacuate the Pokémon out of this center. Misty leaned forward. But how do we do that? She looked at the younger girl and explained. I already contacted the Nurse Joy in Pewter City and let her know that we would be sending over a large group of Pokémon to her. So what can we do? Ash questioned. She quickly came out from behind the counter and gestured for them to follow her. Come on, we don't have much time. With that, Ash and Misty hurried after Joy as she ran across the lobby and through the large double doors that lead into the back of the center. Following her, they found themselves immediately in a large operating room, but Joy didn't stop there. The pink-haired nurse made her way to another door, all the way at the end of the room, and went through it, followed by the two young trainers with her. From there, they stepped into a hallway that had a few doors on either side of the hall. Joy ended up going into the first one on the left, and upon their own entry, Ash and Misty were amazed to find themselves in a room that was full of shelves of Pokeballs. The frantic young medic rushed over to a large machine that was in the middle of the room and had what looked like a teleporter tube connected to it for the transfer of Pokeballs. Joy sat herself down in front of the computer and started to type quickly. Okay, you two, she began urgently. If you want to help, then take all the Pokeballs off these shelves and put them on the teleporter pad. I'll send them to the Pewter City Pokémon Center from there. Hurry. Not arguing with the nurse, both kids began rushing to do just as she commanded. Even Pikachu helped out by running and grabbing Pokeballs off the lower shelves. It was fast and frenzied work. Ash, Pikachu and Misty grabbed Pokeballs as fast as they could, grabbing as many at one time as possible, before running them over to the transporter. From there, they placed the Pokeballs on the pad and Joy would transfer it to the Pewter City Center. By the time the last ball was snatched off the shelf and sent away, a few tense minutes later, both young trainers were sweating profusely. Even Joy had a few beads of sweat breaking out on her forehead from the anxiety of the situation. At last, when the final Pokeball was sent away, she bolted up from the chair and nodded. Okay, that's it, let's get out of here before this whole place blows. Ash and Misty nodded in hectic agreement, and then, as soon as he called Pikachu back to his shoulder, the boy and both young women made a beeline for the door. Once they made it back to the operating room, Joy called out to both of her assistant Pokémon. Chansey, come on, let's go. The two rotund and pink-skinned normal types followed after their superior, and as soon as they all reached the lobby, it was as if time slowed. The final distance to go between there and the front doors seemed like it was a mile away, and their legs felt like they were moving in slow motion. When they at last made it to the glass doors and burst outside into the warm night air, the five of them ran as fast as possible away from the Pokémon Center. It was just at the right moment too, because, upon reaching the end of the concrete pavilion out in front of the building, the time at last came. Underneath the Pokémon Center, all of the charges Team Rocket had placed in Ekans Tunnel finally counted down to 0, and at that moment, the storm came. Just when Ash and the others were about to run down the steps and out onto the street, a massive and ear-ringing explosion erupted throughout the entire lot and shook the city itself all the way to its outermost boundaries. When the initial earth-rattling explosion went off, the force of it was so powerful that it sent Ash, Misty, Joy and both Chansey flying through the air for several yards and depositing them out into the middle of the road. A black cloud of smoke shot up into the sky in the giant form of a Paris mushroom, and it was only rivaled by the chunks of debris, both large and small, that went scattering outwards and upwards, in every direction. By the hand of all of that unrestrained destruction was the Viridian City Pokémon Center utterly annihilated. Large hunks of stone, metal and other dangerously free-falling objects rained down from above as far as 100 yards away. Cars, houses and even other shops and buildings were inflicted by some form of casualty damage as the falling debris landed on everything in sight without regard to size, shape, color or personal property. The sound of the blast was heard in every corner of Viridian and in the homes of local residents. It felt like an earthquake had suddenly shaken the whole town. Back at the scene, Ash and the others were still laying in the road. Fortunately, they were now covering their heads with their arms and were staying huddled closely to the ground while the sheer chaos was unleashed all around them. They could hear the sounds of debris falling and smashing into the ground, as well as on other things, but they still kept their heads down. Ash, for his part, had pulled Pikachu underneath of him and was shielding him with one arm while the other covered his head. After the initial fiery explosion and continuous rain of debris finally came to an end, what felt like an eternity later, all gradually started to quiet down. Eventually, they couldn't hear anything at all, not even the sound of wreckage hitting the ground. Only the roar and loud crackling of flames. At last, Ash uncovered his head and looked up. As soon as he did, his mouth went agape and he stared in dread amazement at the sight before them. Wow, look at that! Misty and Joy looked up as well and glanced toward the Pokémon Center. Sadly, where there was once a big building emblazoned with the letter P upon its roof, now there was nothing but a towering cloud of smoke ascending high into the night sky. The Pokémon Center. Misty began in a wavering voice. It's gone. Joy finished remorsefully as she stared at the empty and badly destroyed lot where her medical center had now been reduced to nothing but a burning pile of rubble. While they stared at the scene of devastation before them, the sound of sirens filled the air. Then, in mere seconds, the streets became filled with police cars, a fire truck and an ambulance. Officer Jenny was at the head of the police battalion on her motorbike, and as soon as she came to a stop, she stared at the rising column of smoke in a similar manner of disbelief. "Are all of you okay?" she finally asked after getting off of her bike and running over to Ash and the others. At the same time, her fellow officers immediately went to work setting up a police barricade while the fire crew rushed in with hoses and a team of water Pokémon to start battling the fire. "Yes, we're fine." Joy was the first to answer as she stood up and brushed off her now soot and smoke-covered uniform. No one else was in the center except us, and before it exploded, we managed to succeed in getting all of the Pokémon transferred to the Pewter City Center. Jenny looked from Joy to the two kids she had originally escorted to the Pokémon Center. "These two helped you?" The red-haired nurse looked back at Ash and Misty and nodded with a smile on her face. "Not only that, but they also helped chase off the criminals who were responsible for placing the bombs that blew up the center." The pretty female officer's eyes widened in surprise as she hurried over to the couple of young trainers. "You two know who was responsible for this?" Ash was distracted as he watched the firefighters and their team of water Pokémon combat the fire that was now burning in the wake of the explosion. Pokémon ranging from Vaporeon, Poliwhirl, Poliwrath, Golduck and even a Cloyster. Misty, however, heard her question and looked at Officer Jenny. "Yes ma'am, we battled them in the center when they came to steal the Pokémon there." Tapping his shoulder, she got Ash's attention and he turned around to face Jenny just as she asked urgently. "Well, who was it? Who attacked the center?" Taking point, he raised his hand and answered. "It was Team Rocket. Those same two criminals we saw on your wanted poster earlier today. They did this." Jenny's face angrily contorted as she clenched her fist and looked up. "How dare they? Those villains. Doing something horrible like this by blowing up a Pokémon Center of all things. They'll pay for this, I swear we'll get them. Misty interjected at that point. They were in a big hot air balloon when they went to escape, but Pikachu zapped them and it exploded. They went flying off somewhere into the city, but we don't know where. Jenny nodded firmly at that. I'll get a couple of units to start an immediate search throughout the city for them. Before she could run back to her squad and give them the rundown though, she stopped and looked at Ash and Misty again. Then, smiling, she raised her hand and saluted them. You both did an incredibly brave and selfless thing today. If not for you, the outcome of all of this could have been much worse. Thank you for playing your part in helping to mitigate this disaster. Both of them looked at each other and then back at Jenny before smiling in gratitude. Ash, chuckling, modestly rubbed the back of his head. You're welcome, Officer Jenny, I'm just glad we were here to help. Misty nodded in agreement. Yeah, I'm happy we were here to help save the lives of Nurse Joy and all the Pokémon in the center. Jenny put her hands on her hips. Well, regardless, you two did a very courageous thing and you have the gratitude of this whole city and I'm sure every person whose Pokémon you helped save. She then looked back. I have to go and start directing my men and inform them of what's happened. You three really should go see the medical unit over at the ambulance to make sure you're okay. Jenny then held up a gloved finger. But, if you stick around until I'm done here, you can return to the station with me tonight. I live there and have a spare guest bedroom. If you aren't afraid to share it, you can stay with me tonight since the Pokémon Center won't be an option now. Ash and Misty adopted expressions that were full of gratitude and quickly voiced it at the same time. Thanks, Officer Jenny, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks so much, we'd love to. Even Pikachu gave voice to his own thankfulness with a chirp of gratitude to the blue-haired policewoman. Jenny then looked at Joy and held up a hand. And you know you're welcome to stay too, Joy, you can room with me. I don't want to see my best friend sleeping outside since your own home just got destroyed. The sweet and kindly Pokémon nurse smiled in return and tilted her head. That would be wonderful, Jen, thank you. Me and Chansey would be happy to stay with you. The two egg-shaped normal types I smiled and called out together. Chansey. Jenny nodded and then went to turn away. Good, well you three go and get yourselves checked up and then I'll come back for you later. If you get tired before then I'll have a squad car take you back to the station so you can clean up and rest if you want. After that, she hurried off to tend to her duties while Ash, Misty and Joy went over to the ambulance to get checked up by the paramedics. Joy, being a medical professional, could tell they were all fine, but she wasn't ever above having a second opinion. More so, she was a Pokémon medic, not a human one, and the last thing she wanted to do was risk any harm to the two young trainers that had just risked so much for her and so many others. However, even as they went to have a medical checkup done, none of them could know that, at the same time, all the way across town, stuck up in the branches of a high tree, were Jessie, James and Meowth. The three foiled criminals were laying amongst the bristly and itchy pine needles of the tree and, with tattered and ripped up outfits, were still recovering from their long flight through the air. Ah! Meowth yelped as he hung upside down by his tail. I think I got pine needles stuck in my tail. That was humiliating. James sighed morosely as he hung across his branch like a draped rug. Beaten by two kids, we didn't even stand a chance. Jessie, whom was stuck between two branches with her upper half hanging down, growled angrily at the thought before suddenly smirking and raising her finger. Yes, but we still managed to blow up that stupid Pokémon Center, and if nothing else, we can say that. Meowth, at that moment, put a hand to his furry chin and hummed in thought. You know, I wonder, that Pikachu was pretty darn powerful. James looked over at him and dropped his head in a whining fashion. You don't have to tell me. I still can't stop from jittering after that shock. Jessie, however, showed a gleam coming into her eye as she looked up. Hey, you're right, Meowth, that kid's Pikachu was quite powerful. Abnormally so. Meowth looked up at her. Whatcha thinkin', Jessie? Smirking, the scantily clad woman looked down at her two comrades and expounded. That Pikachu had some real promise to be a #1 primo Pokémon. What if we captured it and delivered it to the boss? The other two looked at each other and then James blinked in confusion. But why would the boss care about one lousy Pikachu? Jessie cackled softly. He wouldn't care about a normal Pikachu, no, but maybe one that was extra powerful he would. He might even give us a raise or promote us. James's eyes shone like stars. Ooh, a promotion. That sounds fantastic. Meowth held his paws out and grinned. Yeah, and it'd mean more cash too. Plus, maybe da boss would be so grateful he'd kick dat lousy Persian to da curb and make me top cat again. Jessie clenched her fist and smirked. So it's decided then. We'll make it a goal to steal that twerp's Pikachu. All three of them cheered at that before eventually going silent again. They remained that way for a time too until Jessie finally spoke with a sweat drop. Just as soon as we get out of this tree. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX sent over last night and they arrived safe and sound. It took a little moving around to make space, but we managed to find room for all the Pokeballs. Joy smiled at the words of her elder sister in Pewter City as she talked to her via the video phone in Jenny's office back at the police station. The time was slightly before 8 in the morning, following the previous night's disastrous upheaval. "Thank you, Sissy," the apparently younger Joy replied gratefully. "When I spoke to the news crews last night, I made sure to announce to all of the trainers who had Pokémon at my center that they were safe and sound and had been transferred to your center before the explosion." She then held her hand up. "I told them that they could come talk to me today at the police station if they wanted to know more, so I'll be expecting an influx of worried trainers coming here anytime now." The Pewter City nurse nodded. "I suppose you'll have to send them all my way to get their Pokémon back. Unless you have any other way for me to transfer them back to you." The other Joy shrugged. "I don't know. I got a call from the Pokémon League medical organization early this morning. They saw the news reports and wanted more first-hand information. I told them everything that happened and they said that they would be sending me a new supply of medical inventory as soon as possible." She furrowed her brow slightly. "They also said that they would send a new teleporter system within the next 2 or 3 days since they know how urgent it is for the trainers to get their Pokémon back. I can't foresee sending all of them to Pewter City to do so either because it's dangerous to go through the Viridian forest without Pokémon if you're on foot." She then sighed and dropped her shoulders a bit. "So if the teleporter machines arrives in time and I can get the trainers to all wait that long, you'll be able to just send them back to me. But as of right now all I can do is wait on the Pokémon League." She rubbed the bridge of her nose with her fingers. "The only other thing they can do right now is resupply me with what I need to do my job, but it's obviously going to take time to build a new center. Viridian is a major hub of travel, especially for Pokémon trainers, so the League understands that we can't be without one here." She rested one arm on Jenny's desk. "I'll be going to talk to the city council later today about them renting out a space for me to use temporarily. The League said they would pay for that as well, but even still, it will probably take 1 to 2 weeks before I'm set up in a new location and ready to receive patients." Her sister looked at her sympathetically. "It'll be okay, sis, trust me. Our center is big enough to take on more clientele until you get up and running in a new location there. Don't worry, everything will work out." The pink-haired woman smiled at her identical sibling and nodded. "I know you're right, I just hope it gets worked out sooner rather than later." After her call was finished, Joy stood up and walked out of Jenny's office, stepping into the main area of the police station. The female officer's headquarters was very small and quaint, with the double glass door entryway joining the main room of the station, which was the place where Jenny did most of her work. There were 2 rooms in the small building. A guest bedroom, where Ash and Misty had stayed the night before, he on the floor and she in the bed, and Jenny's office, which also served as her bedroom. That was where Joy had stayed, sleeping in Jenny's bed with her since the two of them were old friends. There was a small bathroom between both bedrooms, and on the far back wall of the main room was a door that led into the garage, where Jenny kept her bike and other things. There was no kitchen though, instead there was only a fridge, microwave, a small stove, a cabinet with food and dishware and a sink in the main area of the station.